Hey guys, welcome back to your favorite channel. Who are we going to talk about? Layloola? Yup, today we're diving into what Layloola, the so-called influencer, is actually like, and how exactly she's influencing people. Influencing or wrongly influencing? Well, Layloola is one of the trending creators on TikTok who's been catching a lot of attention lately. If you've been scrolling through your For You page, you've probably seen her content pop up. What makes her interesting isn't just her viral reach, but the contradictions that exist in her content, especially when it comes to how she presents her religious identity online. Before we get into this, I want to make it clear this isn't about attacking anyone personally. This is about analyzing content that's publicly shared and discussing the bigger picture of authenticity on social media. So let's break down what's going on here and why it's worth talking about. When you first land on Layloola's page, the thing that immediately stands out is her distinctive appearance. She has a very specific aesthetic-heavy makeup application that creates an almost doll-like appearance. Her poses are very deliberate, often highlighting her figure in a particular way. She typically poses from one specific angle, with her knee pushed forward, creating a silhouette that emphasizes certain features. What makes this interesting isn't just her appearance itself. Everyone has the right to present themselves however they want online. What's notable is how this presentation contrasts with some of the religious content she posts. Layloola's content seems to fall into a few different categories. First, she has lifestyle content that follows pretty standard TikTok trends. Outfit videos, get ready with me content, typical influencer material that you'd see from many creators. Second, she has what appears to be religious content, specifically content related to Islamic practices. She wears hijab in many of her videos, which is a religious head covering worn by many Muslim women as a symbol of modesty and faith. And this is where the contradiction that many people have pointed out begins to appear. In Islamic tradition, modest dress isn't just about covering your hair. It's about overall presentation, including wearing loose-fitting clothing that doesn't emphasize the body's shape. But in many of Layloola's videos, she pairs the hijab with form-fitting clothing like flare pants or leggings, which many would consider inconsistent with the religious principles behind the hijab. One video that really highlights this contradiction is her Get Ready With Me for Ramadan video. Ramadan is the holy month in Islam where Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset. It's considered a time for increased devotion, reflection, and abstaining from worldly desires. In this video, Layloola starts by wearing what she calls flare pants and leggings, then shows herself throwing them away, seemingly to adopt more modest clothing for Ramadan. She puts on a halabiyah, a loose-fitting traditional garment, and shows herself with prayer items like a new prayer rug and Quran. The contradiction that many viewers pointed out is that just before Ramadan, she had videos complaining that modest clothes don't look modest on her frame. Yet, in this Ramadan video, she's suddenly able to wear modest clothing perfectly fine. This sudden change in style right when Ramadan begins is what many viewers found questionable. What's more confusing is that in this same Ramadan video where she's throwing away items deemed inappropriate, she throws away perfume, which actually isn't prohibited in Islam, but keeps wearing makeup, which some interpretations of Islam would consider equally, if not more problematic during prayer times. Perhaps the most striking contradiction comes from her Valentine's Day content. She posted a video with the caption, "Point of view, I'm your first Arab Valentine." This directly conflicts with Islamic teachings, as Valentine's Day isn't traditionally celebrated in Islam. In fact, many Islamic scholars advise against celebrating it, since it's not part of Islamic tradition and has origins that conflict with Islamic values.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This video in particular seems to undermine her other content, where she emphasizes religious devotion. It's sponsored by Fashion Nova, suggesting a commercial motivation behind content that contradicts the religious values she promotes elsewhere.
They never had a pretty girl from Joburg to me now, and that's what they prefer. I don't touch no wheel, cause I got a chauffeur. First class, how I get around the water. Just lands me with the job, unless you come in with the commas. Or DJ cut me sound up, cause we about to party around up.
And let's be honest, Fashion Nova isn't exactly known for modest clothing. Their brand image centers around tight-fitting, revealing clothing, pretty much the opposite of what traditional Islamic dress codes recommend. So when you see a creator who positions herself as religiously observant enough to wear hijab partnering with Fashion Nova, it creates an obvious disconnect. If you look at the comments on her videos, there's a clear pattern. Many viewers, including those who identify as Muslim, express confusion or disappointment at what they see as inconsistencies. Comments like, "I thought Muslims can't celebrate Valentine's Day," or "I'm not Muslim, but this seems extremely offensive," are common. Her follower-to-view ratio is also telling. Despite having under 300,000 followers, her videos often get massive view counts, suggesting that many viewers aren't regular followers, but are instead hate-watching or viewing out of curiosity rather than genuine support. What we see with Layloola is what some might call the Ramadan switch, a phenomenon where social media presence dramatically changes during religious periods like Ramadan. While it's natural for behavior to change during sacred times, sudden and complete transformations that seem to occur only for the camera can come across as performative rather than genuine. This isn't unique to Layloola. It's a pattern seen across social media during religious holidays of many faiths. People who typically post one type of content suddenly shift to religious content when holidays approach, often returning to their previous content immediately after. I remember seeing this same pattern last year on TikTok. Creators who never mentioned Islam in their content suddenly had Ramadan countdowns, Islamic quotes, and prayer reminders. Then after the end, they were right back to their usual content as if the religious period never happened. It's like watching someone put on and take off an identity like it's just another outfit. We can't ignore the commercial element here. Many of Layloola's contradictory videos are sponsored content, including the Valentine's video for Fashion Nova, which suggests that financial incentives may be influencing content decisions that conflict with the religious values she promotes elsewhere.
I'm not saying afraid and I'm not. I mean, like, yeah, okay. She's fucking wimpy. Is this bitch okay? It's what he said in life. I just didn't be down there, but you know, yeah, okay. Me and she fucking bitch okay. Thank you.
This highlights a larger dilemma for religious influencers. How do you balance monetization opportunities while staying true to your religious principles? When sponsored content directly contradicts religious teachings, it's difficult not to see it as prioritizing profit over principle. This isn't about judging someone's personal choices. It's about recognizing patterns of content creation that seem strategically designed to maximize engagement and profit, even at the expense of consistent values. There's an important distinction between imperfect religious expression, which is human and understandable, and content that seems to use religious symbols as props for engagement. Religious expression on social media can be powerful and positive. Many creators share their faith journeys authentically, including their struggles and imperfections. This kind of content can help others feel less alone in their own religious journeys. But when religious symbols are used inconsistently for views or commercial gain, it crosses into what some might consider exploitation of religious identity. The issue isn't imperfection, it's authenticity. I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting everyone who creates religious content needs to be a perfect practitioner of their faith. That'd be unrealistic and honestly pretty boring content. Some of the most powerful religious content comes from people sharing their struggles, questions, and growth. It's the difference between someone saying, "I'm trying to become more modest in my dress, but I find it challenging sometimes," versus someone wearing a hijab in one sponsored video and then doing a lingerie haul in the next. If we look at Layloola's content timeline, the contradictions become even more apparent. Just scrolling through her page, you can see a video about choosing Deen over Dunya.
في المنام إليك عام كل قربى سيدي لبيك قلبك في المالي سنة وجد السهل.
Essentially choosing faith over worldly temptations, right next to content that seems to celebrate exactly those worldly temptations. In the Islamic tradition, dunya refers to the temporal world and its material concerns, while deen refers to faith and religious practice. So when someone explicitly makes content about prioritizing deen over dunya, but then consistently creates content that celebrates dunya and contradicts deen, it creates an obvious disconnect.
Who's calling that sheep? Who's calling that sheep? Who's calling that sheep? Who's calling that sheep?
What makes this worth discussing isn't just one creator's choices, but the impact these representations can have on wider communities. For young Muslims seeing this content, it can create confusion about religious practices. For non-Muslims, it can reinforce misunderstandings about Islam. When someone presents themselves as a representative of a religious community, which happens implicitly when you create religious content, there's a responsibility that comes with that representation. The concern isn't about personal religious practice, which is between an individual and their faith, but about the public messaging being shared with millions of followers. Imagine being a young Muslim girl trying to figure out how to practice your faith in a Western context. You might look to social media for guidance and examples. If what you see is people who seem to switch their religious identity on and off depending on what's trending or what sponsorship they've secured, that sends a powerful message about treating faith as a fashion accessory rather than a core part of your identity. Similarly, for non-Muslims who may have limited exposure to Islam, seeing contradictory representations can reinforce stereotypes about religious hypocrisy, or the idea that religious symbols like the hijab are just cultural fashion choices rather than expressions of deeply held beliefs. On the other hand, they're influencers who are trying to spread religious awareness with authenticity and consistency. Earth to Khadijah, here's a post dedicated to religious consistency by her. In the caption, she says, "Allah SWT chose you."
Imagine Allah wants to talk to you several times a day and you skip out every single time. Or you show up late, and I know it's not the easiest, but at least put the effort in to show up on time. And Allah isn't just commanding us to pray. There are specific benefits to each prayer that we need in our everyday lives. Things like protection and health and family and everything. Allah has given us so many ways to get to Jannah. That's why we're given so many different ways to do good. You're winning in this life and the afterlife. Think about that.
How beautifully she's explained how faith is about consistency and genuine practice. This is the influence our society needs. This brings us to the bigger question about authenticity on social media. Many creators face pressure to appeal to different audiences simultaneously. They might want to be trendy and appeal to mainstream TikTok culture, while also staying true to their personal beliefs or cultural identity. When it comes to religious content creators specifically, this balance can be particularly challenging. Religious practice is deeply personal, and everyone's journey is different. Not everyone practices perfectly all the time, and that's normal and human. But the issue arises when content seems deliberately contradictory, not as part of a personal journey, but as a strategy to maximize views and engagement. When religious symbols become props rather than expressions of genuine faith, it can feel exploitative to those who hold those symbols sacred. That's right, we need to talk about something that's been catching my eye. Layloola's pose and presentation in her videos. Have you noticed how she positions herself with one knee pushed forward in almost every video? This specific silhouette emphasizes her figure and appears consistently, even across videos with religious themes. This isn't just random, guys. This is a carefully calculated pose, which is totally normal for any content creator. But here's where things get weird. When that presentation directly contradicts the principles behind religious symbols being worn in the same content, it creates this super jarring disconnect. Let me break it down for you. Traditional Islamic modest dress, hijab, is meant to de-emphasize the body's shape and draw attention away from physical attributes. When paired with poses explicitly designed to emphasize those same physical attributes, it creates this massive contradiction in messaging. One thing that's crystal clear when watching Layloola's content is the high production value. The lighting, editing, overall quality all suggests significant time and effort invested in creating these videos. This isn't casual content made on a whim, it's carefully produced material. And that level of production just further proves that our content decisions are strategic rather than casual or accidental. When someone invests that much time and resources into creating content, they've absolutely thought about the messaging and how it'll be received. In one particularly wild video, Layloola claims that modest clothes don't look modest on her frame. Like, what? This is worth unpacking because it speaks to a much bigger issue in how modesty is conceptualized. Islamic modesty guidelines aren't about how clothing looks on different body types, they're about the type of clothing itself. Loose-fitting garments that don't reveal the shape of the body are considered modest, regardless of the body underneath. By suggesting that modest clothing somehow becomes immodest on her specific body, Layloola is completely misrepresenting the concept of religious modesty while simultaneously creating a justification for wearing form-fitting clothing with religious symbols. This framing also creates this super problematic implication that some body types just can't be modest, which isn't an Islamic teaching at all. In fact, Islam emphasizes that modesty is available to everyone regardless of their natural build or appearance. And then in her Ramadan video, she suddenly has no problem wearing traditionally modest clothing, directly contradicting her earlier claim. This inconsistency further suggests that content decisions are driven by trends and engagement rather than genuine religious considerations. We have to consider the possibility that some of these contradictions are intentional ragebait content, designed to provoke strong reactions, even negative ones, because that drives engagement.
Show me I don't need no money, don't need nobody, just need your body.
Social media algorithms don't distinguish between positive and negative engagement. A comment saying this is inspiring and a comment saying this is hypocritical count the same for the algorithmic promotion. This creates a perverse incentive where being controversial can be more profitable than being consistent. The extremely high view counts on Layloola's most contradictory content compared to her follower count suggests that this rage bait strategy might be working super effectively. People who wouldn't normally follow her content are nevertheless watching, commenting, and sharing, often to express disagreement, but still driving metrics that benefit the creator. What we're witnessing with content like this is what some scholars have called performative religious practice that's primarily for show rather than stemming from genuine conviction. Social media has created new opportunities for performative religious identity, where religious symbols can be leveraged for content engagement without necessarily reflecting sincere practice. This isn't unique to Islam or to TikTok. Across platforms and faith traditions, we see content creators adopting religious aesthetics when convenient while discarding them when they conflict with other content goals. The issue isn't specific to any one religion, but rather speaks to how social media incentivizes certain types of performance. What makes Layloola's content particularly notable is not that she's imperfect in her religious practice, we all are, but rather the stark contradictions that appear intentionally designed to maximize engagement across different audience segments. Another concerning aspect of this content pattern is how it can contribute to the misunderstanding of religious symbols as mere fashion choices. The hijab isn't just a headscarf, it represents a set of values and beliefs about modesty, faith, and identity. When religious symbols like the hijab are mixed and matched with content that directly contradicts their meaning, it reinforces misconceptions that these symbols are cultural fashion statements rather than expressions of religious conviction. This misrepresentation has real-world consequences. It contributes to environments where religious symbols are not taken seriously or respected for their true meaning. For Muslims who wear hijab as a sincere expression of faith, seeing it treated as a fashion accessory that can be put on for certain videos and taken off for others can feel deeply disrespectful. There's also some concerning messaging around body image in Layloola's content. In videos where she discusses modest clothing not looking modest on her, there's an implicit focus on her body shape as something that can't be appropriately covered or that inherently draws attention regardless of clothing. This framing isn't helpful for young viewers who may already struggle with body image. It suggests that certain body types are inherently immodest or attention-grabbing, which can create unhealthy associations between body shape and inappropriate dress. Islamic teachings on modesty specifically avoid this kind of body-focused framing. The emphasis is on the clothing itself and the intention behind dress choices, not on categorizing bodies as more or less capable of modesty. The comment sections on Layloola's videos provide valuable insight into how these contradictions are perceived by viewers. Many comments express confusion, disappointment, or concern about the mixed messaging. Comments like, "I thought Muslims can't celebrate Valentine's Day," or "this feels disrespectful," aren't coming from a place of hate, but from genuine concern about the representation of religious values. Many come from viewers who identify as Muslim themselves and are troubled by what they perceive as misrepresentation of their faith. What's particularly notable is that these comments appear consistently across videos with contradictory religious messaging. This isn't an isolated reaction to one video, but a pattern of community response to consistent contradictions. Some might argue that what we're seeing is simply a personal religious journey, someone figuring out their relationship with faith in real time on social media. This is a valid perspective to consider. Many people, especially young adults, go through periods of exploring and questioning their faith. This can involve inconsistent practice as they figure out what aspects of religious teaching resonate with them personally. However, a genuine religious journey typically shows some progression or evolution over time. What we see in Layloola's content isn't a gradual evolution, but rapid stitches between contradictory presentations that seem more aligned with trending topics or sponsorship opportunities than personal growth. It's important to emphasize that this analysis isn't about judging Layloola as a person. We don't know her personal beliefs, struggles, or intentions. What we can analyze are the content choices visible on her public platform. Content creators are essentially running media companies. They make strategic decisions about what to post, when to post it, and how to frame it for maximum engagement. Analyzing these decisions isn't personal judgment, but media literacy. When we see patterns like religious content spiking during Ramadan while contradicting content appears before and after, or religious symbols paired with sponsorships that directly conflict with the values those symbols represent, we're observing content strategy, not personal faith. Both platforms and audiences bear some responsibility in how this kind of content thrives. Platforms design algorithms that reward engagement, regardless of whether that engagement comes from inspiration or outrage. This creates an environment where contradiction and controversy are financially rewarding. As audiences, our viewing habits, comments, and shares directly influence what content succeeds. Every view of ragebait content, even if we disagree with it, signals to the algorithm that this content deserves promotion. This creates a challenging dynamic where calling out problematic content can sometimes amplify it further. It raises the question of how best to respond to content that misrepresents religious values without inadvertently promoting it through engagement. When we talk about religious content on social media, we're not looking for perfection. What would be more authentic religious content actually look like? Well, it's not about never making mistakes or always adhering perfectly to every religious guideline. That's simply not realistic, and it would make for pretty boring content anyway. Authentic religious content is about honesty and consistency. It's about acknowledging your struggles openly rather than pretending they don't exist. Imagine if instead of claiming modest clothes don't look modest on her while posing to emphasize her figure, Layloola had honestly discussed the challenges of balancing modern fashion with religious values. That kind of vulnerability creates genuine connection. Consistency doesn't mean never changing. People evolve in their faith journeys, and that's normal and healthy. But real change happens gradually, not overnight when Ramadan begins and then reverting immediately after it ends. Authentic content shows that progression, with all its ups and downs, rather than jumping between contradictory personas based on what's trending. Financial transparency matters too. Every content creator needs to make a living, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you accept sponsorships that directly contradicts values you claim to represent, you create a disconnect that undermines your authenticity. The most respected religious content creators carefully select brand partnerships that align with their stated values, even if that means turning down lucrative opportunities that don't fit. Perhaps the most concerning aspect of contradictory religious content is its potential impact on young viewers who are still forming their understanding of faith, identity, and values.
Trust who? Trust me and I can set you free. Left your man, came straight to me.
Adolescence and young adulthood are critical periods for identity formation. Young people look to various role models, including social media influencers, to help shape their understanding of how to express their identities, including religious identities. When they see content that treats religious symbols as interchangeable fashion accessories, or that switches between contradictory value systems depending on what's trending, It can create confusion about the meaning and importance of consistent values. For young Muslims specifically, seeing hijab paired with content that directly contradicts its purpose can create confusion about religious practice and potentially make it harder to develop a coherent understanding of faith. Looking forward, it's worth considering how religious expression on social media might evolve. As audiences become more media literate and more aware of content strategies designed to maximize engagement, creators may find that authenticity becomes increasingly valuable.
I'm the one that introduced you to the right now. Oh my God. That's it. Well, all right.
We may see a shift away from the stark contradictions of content like Layloola's toward more nuanced, honest expressions of religious identity that acknowledge struggles and imperfections without abandoning core values for views or sponsorships. This evolution would require changes from platforms, creators, and audiences alike. Platforms would need to reconsider algorithms that reward outrage. Creators would need to prioritize consistency over controversy. And audiences would need to be more conscious about what content they engage with and promote. In analyzing Layloola's content, we're not just looking at one creator, but at patterns that reveal larger truths about social media, religious expression, and the complicated incentives that shape online content. The issue isn't imperfect religious practice. All of us are imperfect in our values and beliefs. The concern is about content that seems deliberately designed to maximize engagement through contradiction, potentially at the expense of authentic representation of religious symbols and values. As viewers, the best response isn't outrage, but awareness. Understanding how content is crafted to provoke reactions helps us become more conscious consumers. Recognizing patterns of contradiction helps us think more critically about what we're seeing and how it might impact younger or more impressionable viewers. And for creators, Layloola's content offers an important reminder about the power and responsibility that comes with the platform. When we share content publicly, especially content involving religious symbols and values that hold deep meaning for billions of people, how we present those symbols matters. In the end, this isn't about calling for anyone to be canceled or attacked. It's about encouraging more thoughtful, consistent content creation and more media-literate viewing habits. It's about recognizing that while everyone has the right to express themselves however they choose online, we also have the right and responsibility to think critically about the content we consume. What do you think about this kind of content? Have you noticed similar patterns with other creators? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this analysis interesting, make sure to like and subscribe for more discussions about social media trends and content creation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.